Good evening. Welcome, welcome, WOS members and guests. I'm Doug Santoni. I'm a WOS board member. I'm a longtime birder. I live about 10 minutes south of here near the Arboretum. So welcome to our once a year combined in-person and virtual get-together. Thanks for coming out. Thanks for tuning in. And for our in-person audience, could I ask for a show of hands, how many of you are WOS members? Wow, that's great. Thank you. We have a great program for everybody tonight, whether you're here or online, featuring a renowned speaker. I'd like to start, though, with, with our Indigenous land acknowledgement. Our enjoyment and study of birds and their habitats extends across vast and far-flung regions. WOS acknowledges that these lands are the current and traditional homelands of the indigenous tribes and peoples of the Pacific Northwest. Today, we offer our respect for their history and culture and their wisdom in having cared for these places from time immemorial and for generations to come. We encourage all to tread lightly and to treat these places with respect. All of our WOS officers and board members are delighted that you're participating this evening. We happily accept volunteers. We also welcome your feedback and your ideas for future speakers. Our website, was.org, is full of great, helpful information. Let me share a little bit about WOS, what WOS does. WOS offers field trips thanks to a very talented group of organizers and trip leaders. Check out the WOS website for details and ongoing updates. WOS members get preferential field trip registration. And it was actually one of these WOS field trips, an amazing winter trip to the Okanagan that was kind of my spark trip for my own WOS engagement. If you're interested, we also have a WOS YouTube channel where you can learn more about WOS. You can find past presentations like tonight that go back at least 5 years. And WOS also has a presence on Facebook, on X, on Instagram. We know that the future of bird conservation is in the hands of young people. So WOS provides financial and other support to the Patrick Sullivan Young Birders Fund. Your contributions help us provide grants to aspiring young birders. You can learn more at the website, and I believe one of the recipients will be speaking at the upcoming annual conference in a couple weeks. As if there weren't already more than enough reasons to join WOS, and thank you all since most of you are already WOS members. Let me offer you one more. Free online access to the Cornell Lab of Ornithology's Birds of the World. And as I'm a Cornell alum and a lab supporter, I love getting to promote Birds of the World. It's an amazing resource, over 11,000 bird species, and it's free with your WOS membership. Do the math. The normal price is $49 a year. You can get a WOS membership for about half that amount. So it's a very good deal. While registration for the upcoming annual WOS conference is already closed and is now closed, I'm sorry. Those of you already signed up should have an absolutely amazing experience. It's a great program. It'll include field trips exploring Southeast Washington and nearby parts of Idaho and Oregon. For those who are curious, discussions are already underway to select next year's conference location, which we hope to have finalized in a matter of weeks. Maybe it'll be in the western part of the state. We'll see. So now I get to shift gears and talk about our speaker. It's my true honor to introduce Dennis Paulson, but let me tell you about him first. Birder, naturalist, world traveler, author, scientist, entomologist, a word I didn't know, odontologist, speaker, photographer, blogger, teacher, nature tour guide, and educator. Wow. A native Floridian Dennis received his PhD in zoology from the University of Miami, but luckily for us, Dennis relocated to the Pacific Northwest. He's one of the founders of WOS back in 1988 and a founder and teacher of Seattle Audubon Birds Connect Seattle Master Birder program from its inception, also circa 1988. He served as curator for both the Burke Museum at UW and the Slater Museum of Natural History at the University of Puget Sound. He's taught at 3 universities and at a lot of adult education venues. He studied dragonflies and birds worldwide, published over 100 scientific papers and a dozen books. Look at that list of books, um, and including a bird guide to bird finding in Washington. And I was kind of very impressed. There's actually a dragonfly species named in honor of Dennis Paulson. He's an enthusiastic 6. Wow, wow, wow. He's an enthusiastic nature photographer with photos, published books, magazines, interpretive displays, traveled to all 7 continents to observe and photograph birds, a world-renowned dragonfly expert. But Dennis enjoys nothing more than teaching and sharing his scientific knowledge of biology, blended with an appreciation for nature. So we in this room, and those of you online, are about to be the lucky recipients of Dennis's knowledge in what by our own accounting is Dennis's 15th presentation to us. Dennis?
My lightsaber.
It is May the 4th. Be with you. Something about Madagascar.
Okay, Madagascar. I'm not a gamer, by the way. Somebody needs to work on that. Maybe I am. Maybe taking bird photos all over the world as being like a gamer. And not only birds, but everything. My wife Netta and I travel to see all of nature, basically. We love everything that's out there. We photograph tree leaves just to get a picture of that species, and flowers, and every kind of animal there is, from worms right up to mammals. And we've done a lot of scuba diving and snorkeling and photographing marine invertebrates and fish the same way. I just can't get enough of it, really. So, and Madagascar was a place I'd always wanted to go. I didn't know that I'd ever get to go there, but I got contacted sometime in about 2015, I guess, by a dragonfly associate who actually just started a dragonfly themed nature tour company called Odinate Tours. And he said, our first tour is to Madagascar. Are you interested? And I'd never thought I would go there particularly to look for dragonflies, but I said, you bet we're interested. And fortunately, he and all the other people, most of the other people on the group, were very interested in the broad spectrum of nature. So we spent time looking at birds and lemurs and chameleons and all the stuff that was there. People would go out at night to try to find frogs, as well as seeing a whole bunch of wonderful dragonflies, including probably a half a dozen undescribed species that had been undescribed as of yet. One of them we found was named later after David Attenborough. So because they had really wanted to find one to name after David Attenborough, and it was no trouble, we did. So that was very cool. Anyway, so we went on this tour. The tour lasted about maybe 8 days or something like that. And friends of ours, Susan Masta and Jay Withcott, we went with them early to go to Western Madagascar because the tour was just going to be in Eastern Madagascar. And Madagascar was not like this. I just want to tell you that for those of you who have seen this movie, there are no lions, no hippos, no zebras, no giraffes, but there are lemurs. And if you'll notice these sort of side characters, oh, no penguins either. The sort of side characters there are lemurs. And we saw a bunch of them, and they were really special. And so lemurs are found only in Madagascar. And they're a very large group of primates, like we are, and they're found only in Madagascar. And you can see why. This was the brown thing in the middle is the southern continent, Gondwana, many, 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 many years ago. And with the Earth's plates moving, it started breaking up. And you can follow the progress of that. And Madagascar was right there in the middle where it was breaking up at some point. And then India and Madagascar broke off from the African continent around the same time the African continent was breaking off from South America. And South America was drifting west. And so then the Madagascar was stuck with India, but then India left it behind and moved to adhere to the Asian continent. So really fascinating things going on. But because of this stuff, Madagascar has been isolated for very, very, very many years, and it's developed its own flora and fauna very extensively. And the things that it shares with other places are flying things like birds and butterflies and dragonflies that have been able to move to Madagascar from the African continent. But otherwise, it's pretty much its own thing. So it's really pretty neat in that respect. And in our 19 days there, we saw these species, 17 amphibians, 45 reptiles, 104 birds, and 10 mammals. If you add the reptiles and amphibians together, 62 species of what we call herps. There's no place in the world where you find that ratio of birds to herps. And mostly you see lots of birds and a few amphibians and a few reptiles if you go and travel anywhere in Washington or anywhere in the world. Here in Madagascar, they are really a dominant group. The mammals are a fairly small group, and very many of them are nocturnal, so you just don't see them. Really very weird and special ones, which we mostly didn't see, but there are some that are active in the daytime. On the right, you can see the percent endemic. Endemic means occurring nowhere else in the world. All of the amphibians, most of the reptiles and mammals, but only a third of the birds. Because again, birds can fly and they're strong winged and they're fairly large, so they move around continents. And Madagascar shares a lot with Africa. It gets a lot of wintering birds like shorebirds from Asia and Europe that winter down there that are the same as the birds that winter in Africa and maybe India. So I guess, yeah. Oh, and then among the birds, 5 families of birds are endemic. 5 families, that's a fairly large classification group like warblers or sparrows or tanagers or sandpipers. And there are 5 groups of those that are endemic to Madagascar, nowhere else. There's the island. It's it's one of the largest islands in the world. It's 1,000 miles long. So there's been plenty of time in an island that size for not only things to evolve, but then things to differentiate. You have northern and central and southern populations that change into different species over time, western and eastern populations. The wind is from the east, bringing rain into the eastern side of Madagascar. It's exactly the reverse of what we have here in Washington. We have winds from the west that deposit water in the Olympics and Cascades, and then as they go over, the mountains have lost a lot of their moisture, and so the east side is quite dry, as we all know. Madagascar is exactly the reverse. The west side is wet with wet rainforests and montane forests, and then that wind loses its moisture as it sweeps down the western side of the island, and it's just as arid as a desert in some areas. Very, very huge difference in that relatively short distance across that island. And so we went there early. Jay and Susan and Netta and I went there about 10 days early to see the west side. And so we had the greatest experience on the west side before we actually joined the other members of the Dragonfly tour. And so this particular slideshow is only the west side, only the first part of the tour. And I'll maybe someday be able to show the eastern part because that was just as much fun. We flew into Antananarivo, which is the capital of Madagascar, which most people there call Tana, and had stayed at very nice hotels. It was very, very well set up for tourists. All the hotels we stayed in were really nice. They had beautiful grounds full of wildlife. And you can't really do Madagascar on your own very well. You really need to be with a group, with a tour company or a guide or something like that, who knows the languages, French and Malagasy, and who can take you around. But right there in the garden of our hotel, there were mynas, not a Madagascar native. This is an introduced species in Madagascar, as it is in many other parts of the world, an Asian species. But then there were plenty of native species as well. Madagascar bulbul was our first endemic bird that we saw, quite different than any other bulbuls I've seen anywhere else. And photes, red photes, the male is red, the female looks surprisingly like a house sparrow, even though it's in the weaver family, which is not the same as the house sparrow family, but there you go. And these are colonial, they build nests in small groups. There was a pond on the property where we found some aquatic creatures as well as Madagascar kingfisher, which is closely related but not the same as the African pygmy kingfisher. Very tiny little thing. And we saw our first dragonflies there. This is a common species in Africa that's mated across to Madagascar. And I put the names up there not because I don't know what they are, but just so you could read the name at the same time I'm saying it. So hopefully it gives you a little more info. And we saw our first chameleon there. Madagascar is the island of chameleons. That family occurs all over Africa and east into the Middle East and the western part of the Indian subcontinent. But Madagascar is the king. There's 130 species of chameleons in Madagascar, in all sizes from great big monsters, 14, 15 inches long, to tiny things that are not much more than an inch long. An adult lizard, inch and a half long. We didn't see that particular kind, too bad. And they're still discovering new species of chameleons there. This is one of the very common ones that we saw on a number of occasions. You know, chameleons are the lizards that change color to match their environment. They're the lizards with our eyes seemingly disconnected. Each eye moves independently of the other, and they can focus on two things at once. Pretty incredible creatures. And then they have a prehensile tail that they can hook around a branch like a monkey. It's the only place in the world with day geckos. Geckos are a group all over the tropics of the world, mostly nocturnal, but the ones in Madagascar, at least a bunch of them, are diurnal, and they're just incredibly beautiful things. This is about 6 inches long. This particular species has been introduced to the big island of Hawaii. So has anybody ever seen a day gecko on Hawaii? Oh, excellent. Yeah. So after about a day in Tana, we got on a plane and flew over to the west side of the island. This is flying across the island. You go through some fairly moist mountains where they're growing rice, mostly in these terraces, just like they do in large areas in Asia. These wonderful hillside terraces. As we flew west, it got drier and drier. And there's a big muddy river there, and the deep in the valleys was woody vegetation, but up on the hillsides was pretty arid looking already. And then we were over these mountain ranges and into the flat western side of Madagascar. And this is sort of the characteristic Madagascar flora here, or woodland, you can call it. And then we landed in Tulear. It's spelled like you see it there in the middle, but it's pronounced Tulear, and got off our plane. And the first day we were there, we had a guide, an African tour company arranged us to have us a guide and a driver in there because we really needed that. And so we had a guy who drove us all around who knew something about the birds. It was a perfectly nice guy to be with. And here's our first afternoon. We went out to the west or to the north of Tulear and into these open areas just to see what we could see. And the people going by there, looked at us like we were about the oddest things around at that time. And Madagascar was populated by people from both East Africa and the Indo-Pacific, from the Indonesia especially. So they're a mixture of those two types of people. They have their own language called Malagasy, and really an interesting place. It's got a lot of poverty. It's got a lot of environmental problems. It's a really sad place in that way. And you go between driving through towns where you see that poverty and you see the destroyed forests, and then you go up a hill and you get into a national park and a beautiful rainforest. So fortunately, they have the system of parks and they are protecting a lot of their land. But as I say, we looked for and photographed just about everything. This is the largest robber fly I've ever seen, about an inch and a half long, that had killed and taken a grasshopper up into this acacia and was about to eat it, stick its proboscis in and suck it dry. And again, a fair number of as I said, the bird species only 37% endemic. So a lot of species there are from Africa, especially the common open country ones. To see the endemic Madagascar ones, you almost have to go into the forests, into the special habitats. These Namakwa doves are all over sub-Saharan Africa, but we saw them there. And we got to the water side there and saw both greater and lesser flamingos. And then we stayed overnight in this arboretum on Soke. Excuse me. And it was a wonderful place. We saw our first butterflies there. This African monarch is closely related to our American monarch and some of its relatives. And it's called African monarch, whereas it's also common in Asia and Australia, where it's called plain tiger. So we have all these different common names, but we can always go back to the scientific name to find something in common. So our first lizards, our first regular lizards, not chameleons there. This Madagascar swift is actually a relative of the iguana group in the Americas rather than the agama group, which are similar lizards on Africa. So these lizards have been in Madagascar presumably before Africa and South America and Madagascar went their own ways. So it's really fascinating things like that there. And again, a common African bird here, but it was a delight to see it in Madagascar. It's the only bee eater in Madagascar. There are one species of drongo. Drongos are fairly common in Southeast Asia, Africa, and Australia. And the Madagascar one is endemic. The adult males are solid shiny black. This is a young male. They're passerine birds. They're fly catchers. They go out after flying insects. Madagascar turtle dove, sort of a intermediate between the true pigeons and the doves, like the Eurasian collared dove. Again, many of the things I'm showing you here we saw nowhere else, but just this small part of Madagascar. They're not in the eastern part at all. They're only in the open, dry country. There are quite a few sunbirds, not quite a few, there are a few sunbirds in Madagascar. This is a group all over Africa and southern Asia. Very common nectar feeding birds. They're the ecological equivalent of our hummingbirds, but they have to perch to sip nectar. They don't hover. They all have these beautiful curved bills for inserting into flowers. And there's just some little inconsequential looking birds. You don't quite know what family they're in. This is one about the size of I don't know, a size of a yellow-rumped warbler or something. It's in the same family as the cisticolas, the grass warblers of Africa. And the interesting thing, if you sort of look into the literature, a lot of the birds in Madagascar have bounced from one family to another. They're not quite sure what they were, their own family, or they're related to these African things or related to these Asian things. And then along came DNA, along came genetics. And now all these birds have been put into tubes, and their DNA has been studied and in some way, and now they're starting to sort out, well, this bird actually belongs in this family, and this bird's actually its own family. And so that's the kind of thing we've learned of birds all over the world. It's been done in Madagascar in relatively recent years. It's got a couple of these, several kinds of weavers there. The Sakalava weaver is another communal nesting one. This is the males build a nest, and they display to attract females, just like a lot of the same genus as a lot of the African weavers. And this male is building this nest now. And we were in this arboretum, so we actually had a trail we could walk around and see some labeled plants, which was really neat to see some of the odd plants of Madagascar. This is a member of the hibiscus family, the mallow family, but the flower is about 3 inches across. It's just gorgeous. It's a shrub. And here's the Apocynaceae, a group of plants, many of which are toxic. Some of you know about oleander, which is widely planted in the south in this country, which is toxic. You don't want to eat any part of an oleander. The same of this desert rose, which is all over Africa and also in Madagascar, occurs in both places. And it's actually used as a fish poison and a arrow poison in Africa. And it's also planted in Arizona and places like that in the New World as a horticultural plant. And then some really, really odd ones. In this dry country, I guess some of these trees have these gigantic trunks to store water in them. And so this Pachypodium, several species of Pachypodium is one of them, also in the same family as that desert rose. But just magnificent things sticking up out of the woodlands. And some of you will know that this looks very much like another tree, which I'm going to show you a little later. And this family Didieriaceae, which occurs in Madagascar and parts of Africa, has all these really weird plants. adapted to dry habitats, arid habitats, and they're actually related closely enough to cactus that people have actually grafted some of these on cactus plants. But they're just very strange. You see them all over the place that you're driving around. And there's a whole group of ground-dwelling cuckoos in Madagascar called kuas. This is one of them, about the size of a roadrunner. And again, another lizard, a little gecko. This is a nocturnal gecko. We just happened to disturb it, I guess, and saw it in the daytime, about 5 inches long. Very pretty, some of them. And then here we are in the Arboretum. And they said, well, you go out at night with a flashlight, you might see a lemur. And we did. This was like very close to the cabin we were staying in. And you just sort of look around the trees and then you'll get an eye reflection from something. And this thing is about the size of a, I don't know, a large rat, I guess you could say. But it's very clearly a lemur. It's got those forward pointing eyes. It's got feet like a tree frog with big pads on the end. Just a wonderful creature. And it just went zipping around the branches as we watched. Then we went back, then we went through Chuliar again, heading north. And there were pied crows everywhere. This is a very common African bird that was all over the arid side of Madagascar again. And driving through this arid country, sort of not too dissimilar than being in Arizona or northwestern Mexico, Baja California. Those plants in the distance are those Didieraceae that I showed you a bit ago, and a lot of acacias. And we came upon sort of saline lakes, which had a few birds in them, like black-winged stilts, an old world relative of our black-necked stilt. Very similar in appearance and behavior. And there were wintering curlew sandpipers there. This is probably one of the commonest shorebirds in Madagascar in the winter and actually in Africa. They breed in Asia and migrate south into southern Africa, southern Asia, Australia, and all the way across Africa. Very, very common. And we arrived at our hotel Le Paradisier in Ifati, which is on the southwest coast, north of Tuliar. Beautiful place to stay. You're sitting having breakfast at Madagascar. Magpie robin will come along and take a piece of banana if you'll give it to him. Magpie robins are an Asian group. Here's a case that's not related to African birds at all, but related to a group of birds that are in southern Asia. And we were in a room on the second floor. We looked out on the Indian Ocean, just a wonderful view. I don't know if you can see the yuccas in the lower left and the agave plants to the right of them up the beach, both American, both New World plants that are planted in Madagascar in these arid areas. We saw quite a bit of prickly pear too from Arizona and Mexico. So we have imported so many plants from the Eastern Hemisphere, the old world, into the Western Hemisphere where we grow them horticulturally and we just take them for granted. They're all over the place. Well, they've done something the same, maybe not quite as many, but have done the same thing from west to east. You know. And we watched these fishing boats, the dhows as they're called, with the square sails. They're all over the Indian Ocean, especially the western part of the dry part of the Indian Ocean. And they were out there fishing. And groups of people were pulling in nets on the shore, pulling in all kinds of different fish. I would have loved to have been able to go snorkeling or scuba diving there, but where we were, the water was really murky, as you can see. Not that great for that sort of thing. But I was photographing, and this kid wanted to show me what they'd caught. So he held up his fish. And I don't know if you can see the beak coming out to the right of the hand. There's a little skinny thing the fish is a half beak or ballyhoo. Very common fish all over the tropical oceans. They're used as bait in the Caribbean, I know, to catch large fish like sailfish and stuff. And that beak you see is just the lower jaw. That's why they call it a half beak. And they're eating plankton out there in the ocean, and the bigger fish are eating them, except when they get caught by the people. We saw a moderate amount of marine life along the shore. I didn't add too many photos of that, but one of the neat ones was this. There's a lot of land hermit crabs in the tropics that live on land, but they still have to go to the shore to get the mollusk shells, the snail shells in which they live. So we see them on the beaches. And there were some other shorebirds on the beaches right outside our hotel. Green shanks were patrolling up and down. This is an old world relative of the yellow legs. And this one has a mole crab, which we have on our beaches here as well. And birds like that eat mole crabs on the Washington coast. We had whimbrels, which we just saw quite a few of out at the coast a few days ago. This one's got some kind of crab that I picked off the beach. And being on the second floor as we were was really neat because the birds would fly past. These black swifts were going back and forth, cruising for insects. And I could stand there with my telephoto lens and occasionally get one in focus and get a picture, throw away all the other digital photos, of course. And even neater in some ways, they're migrating giant swallowtails were migrating down the beach. And if I stood there long enough, I'd have enough of them coming by where I finally got one of those in focus. And bigger than any swallowtail in North America. Snakes are pretty common in Madagascar. If you're a ophidiophobe, you might think twice about going there. But this one was on the grounds of the hotel. We saw it next to the swimming pool, went over to get photos of it, and it just jumped in the pool, swam across it to the other side. And there were trails from the hotel off into the woodland there, so that every day we would just go for walks out there. And it was so full of lizards. It was just amazing. It's really a lizard island. These are lizards from 3 different families here. The upper right are those ones that are like the iguanas from the New World, like that one I showed before, but a different genus. The upper left is a skink. That's a family all over the world. And the 2 on the bottom are from an African family, the girdled lizards. And they're terrestrial, as you can see. They were just running along the path. And it's really great fun to see them. And again, we saw a surprising number of snakes. This is a very small, probably 16 inches long snake that was there. I mean, I don't know much about their biology. I'm sure you could find out something, but I haven't really read about what it is they eat. And another little one, even smaller. This was about a foot long. Very, very pretty snakes are, though. A giant cockroach that we found along the trail. This is 2 or 3 times the size of the cockroaches that are in houses in the US. And that's an egg. Those are eggs that it's got are extruding from its body. This is obviously female, the sort of egg capsules that they lay. And just really neat insects all the time, just things totally different than anything we've ever seen. A clicked beetle that was about a foot, an inch long. Very large beetle with beautiful antennae. And still another snake. There are 2 kinds of boas, actually 3 species of boas in Madagascar. Boas are a New World family, also occur in parts of Africa, and then on Madagascar and nowhere else. And you can see it looks very impressive, but you can see it in my hand there. It wasn't very big. And another sunbird feeding on the trees that they have planted around there. But a beautiful one. And another kua, these ground cuckoos running around. These are the 2 I showed you pictures of were the only 2 we saw on the entire trip. So fortunately, they were close enough and we were able to get photos of them. Then we went to a place called the Reniala Private Reserve by car up to the north of Ifati. All the birders, every birder that goes to that part of Madagascar goes to that reserve because it's got some pretty neat birds in it. Again, it's got more of this ditty area. There's several genera of this family that look very much like that. And there were baobabs there. This is the one that was like that pachypodium that I showed you before. There are different families, but they've obviously converged on this incredibly massive tree trunk size. And you can see on the right there, I've always been a tree hugger, so I couldn't wait to hug that baobab. The one on the left, you see the holes in the trunk. They're actually where people have driven spikes in to be able to climb the tree. And the spikes aren't in there now, but they could put them in there, I guess, climb up the tree when it's in fruit. And baobab fruits are really something special. And here's one of them photographed from the ground with a telephoto. but I didn't know anything about them until I read about them after we were there. Baobabs are all over Africa. They're in Madagascar and they're in Australia. That's the only place they occur. But the fruit is apparently just fantastic. That's the top quote is a taste. Somebody said they taste somewhere between grapefruit, pear, and vanilla. And then all the things they've been used for in medicine down below that. So fine, I don't know. We don't sell them in the stores here though. Anybody ever eaten a baobab? Oh, okay, okay. And again, just spectacular insects every day. This grasshopper locust was about 2 inches long, maybe 3 inches long, really huge, and very brightly colored because they feed on milkweeds. And just like our monarch butterflies, anything that eats milkweeds, it becomes toxic itself and inedible to most predators. And so they advertise that by being very showy. And that's what you have there. If you open the wings are orange. They're spectacular. We didn't catch it and open the wings. And here's another one of the endemic Madagascar families, the mezites. There are several species of mezites, just one in the western part called subdesert, and a couple more in the forest in the east. This is the only one we saw. This is about the size of I don't know, a kestrel or something like that body size. But again, this is the reason that people go to this place. And this is, to me, was even a better reason. The ground rollers are another endemic family with a couple species in the forest in the east and this one species in the west. It's got a smaller body size than a roadrunner, but runs around like one. And mostly these birds eat insects, as you might guess. Some of them are big enough to eat small lizards. And then another endemic family, and this is the largest, the most diverse endemic family, the vangas. There are quite a few species of vangas. They're all over the island, and they really vary a lot in what they look like. It's sort of been just like the Galapagos finches that you read about, but much more a divergence into different niches. And the sickle-billed, which is the largest, is an insect eater, and it probes into crevices with that long curved bill to pull out insects. And here's one that's a little more normal looking, this Newtonia, but it's also a vanga. So all these really different, weird looking birds that were thought people didn't quite know what to do with them, little by little have been put into this vanga family. And so they realize what an amazing, diverse evolution that they've undergone. And this is about the size of maybe a towhee. And then some birds that are just run-of-the-mill families of birds, but of course they only a Madagascar species found nowhere else in the world. Not that different from a whirlwill. And a very special raptor there, the banded kestrel, endemic to Madagascar. This is the reason that the hawk lovers go to Madagascar to try to see this. It's very rare and hard to find, but in this Reniala Reserve, there's a pair that nests there, and you can depend on as long as they continue to nest there, I guess. But they also raising young. We actually were taken right to the nest. Yeah. And my friend Bud Anderson, who actually went on a round the world trip to see all the falcons of the world, saw his banded kestrel right in the same place. Maybe one of these young birds that was 9 years old. And then we drove back to Toliar down the coast. The man and his son just really wanted their picture taken. They made it very clear to us that so we all stood there taking pictures of them. They thought that was the greatest thing. They posed for us. They walked over to this mangrove tree and posed by the mangrove tree then. But we saw marine birds on that trip. We saw migratory common ringed plovers, which are all over Eurasia, wintered there. Kittless's plover, which is an African resident. The two terns, great crested and lesser tern, are all across the Indian Ocean and into the Pacific a little bit. The one thing we didn't see there was a crab plover, which was the shorebird I most wanted to see. We could not find one. That's a really amazing bird that's a family of its own. Look it up in a book sometime. Anybody seen a crab plover? Goodness. just all kinds of neat marine creatures that we didn't. I mean, I could have spent a week right there, not just we went from place to place to place, and each one of them was so interesting that we certainly could have liked being there longer. Mud skippers are fish of the Indian Ocean and the Western Pacific. They live in the water, but as the tide goes out, they come right out on the mud. And you can see they have sort of a bulging gill cover there. They hold water in their head like that, and they respire into that water and out of it through their gills, just like any other fish. But they can hop around on land. They move themselves forward with their pelvic fins, and they go after little invertebrates that are on the mud. And you see them all over the place when you're in these areas. And the ghost crabs are all over the tropics too. They're very whitish usually. That's why they got the name ghost crab. They run like the wind down the beach and dive into a hole. And a couple of members of the heron family. We saw quite a few members of the heron family there. The dimorphic egret is called dimorphic because it's got a white morph and a dark morph, like a reddish egret does on our shores to the south, related to little egrets and snowy egrets, as you might guess. And the little heron is related to our green heron, it's that size, and the striated heron of South America. And alas, at some point we had to leave there and head inland. Beautiful sunset on the Indian Ocean. Back through Tuliar, definitely a place for bicycles, and out to the east. Now we were crossing Madagascar, and it was a long, long road still as we got into more and more forest as we went across into Zambitse National Park. I said French is one of the official languages there, but you see from that sign they also use English. And here's Jay and I and Susan walking down the road looking for birds. And we found them. Madagascar cucurula is another of the endemic bird families, found nowhere else, one species, nowhere else in the world. It's an insect and small vertebrate eater. It's about the size of a sharp-shinned hawk, say. And two kinds of parrots there, greater Vasa parrot, which we didn't see, and lesser Vasa parrot, which again is about 12, 14 inches long, maybe. Very unusual looking for a parrot, just a dark gray thing with a long tail and rounded wings, but we did get to see them there. And one of two owls we saw. This one is related to our burrowing owl and the Eurasian little owls. It's a small owl, but it's a woodland one. And just, again, all kinds of neat invertebrates. These spirobolid millipedes are all over the world in the tropics, but Madagascar was just full of them. This is like 6 inches long. Just a great big millipede on the side of a tree. And they had another group of millipedes called spherotheriid millipedes that are pill millipedes. They actually are very short millipedes, perfectly good millipedes with two pairs of legs on every body segment, but they can roll into a tight ball. That's why they're like pill bugs, which are in our part of the world, which are isopods, crustaceans. But these are millipedes, and they have a way of locking the front end of the thing and the back end of the thing together, so they're a perfect sphere, and no predator can get at them at all when they do that. That's really pretty neat. And again, just ho-hum, just brightly colored grasshoppers. This family is full of brightly colored grasshoppers, and I read that we thought, oh wow, they're all like that. No, they're not. Just certain species of the family have gone into eating toxic plants, poisonous plants, and they are poisonous themselves, and they advertise it. All the other members of the family are brown and cryptic and hiding, and you don't see them. So that was kind of, but they're really neat. And another lemur. We went with a guide on this trail in the forest, and we came to a dead tree, and he knocked on it, and this thing popped up like that. And I said, oh, do you feed him or something? He said, no, just for some reason, when you do that, it comes out to look at you. So it's about the size of a small cat. And just another one of the lemurs we saw. There were paradise flycatchers in all the woodland there. Paradise flycatchers are in Africa and Asia as well. And they're polymorphic, some of the species, either white or rufous. And I have yet to find an explanation for that. We know about polymorphism in some organisms. We don't understand why these are white or rufous, but that's the same species. And they're not an R flycatcher family. They're an old world flycatcher family, but they do this have the same sort of habits. And another one of the day geckos. This is the largest day gecko, about 10 inches long, climbing up a tree. And a long-billed Berneria, which is another member of the Vanga family. Looks not very much like any of the others, but it really looks like an old world warbler, which is what they thought it was for a long, long time before they did this more careful studies. And the Angricum orchid, which are really pretty special. I saw those in hothouses in Florida where I lived there, but they're native to Madagascar, about a half a dozen species of them. Pretty spectacular. Insect pollinated. And we were just looking on the leaves and the trees and everywhere. There's a very small species of gecko. That's the adult of it actually on the left. It's a diurnal gecko, runs around the trees in the daytime. And on the right is a bug. That's an assassin bug. Assassin bugs kill other insects with their beak. They poison them. It's like a rattlesnake bite. They stick the beak in, the other insect's dead, just like that. And then they suck out the juices. And quite a few bugs do that. But the assassin bugs seem especially common in Madagascar, and many of them brightly colored. So I think they may well be what we call aposematically colored, warning colored. Don't try to eat me. This is two different kinds right here. Spectacular. You can see the long beak on the one on the right very plainly that they pierce their prey with. And my favorite lemur. This is a Barrow's shifak. It's pronounced shifak because that's what their call sounds like. They actually have a loud call that they make that's two-noted and that people think sounds about like shifak, shifak. So that's where they got that name from. And this is about the size of a spider monkey, say, and just really just gorgeous. And they have these forward painting eyes. They look intelligent because of that, I guess. And these padded toes, very different from a monkey foot. They do have a claw in there, but it's hidden. And they can use those toes, as I say, about like a tree frog does. And so now we were still in pretty dry country, a special endemic palm there, and this is sandstone hills. And our group before we met the dragonfly tour people, we stayed in a little hotel in this sort of oasis. The Hotel Isolo Branch. That was our cabin, or we had two cabins. But it was a wonderful oasis, and all sorts of things came in there. They had planted this night blooming cereus. Some of you may have seen these in Florida or the tropics. The flower is 10 inches across, and they're just pretty spectacular. And they bloom at night. This is early in the morning before it had closed up. Not native there, native to the New World. But the thing with this oasis was full of dragonflies, so we had a great time there. And when we actually met the dragonfly tour people, we actually brought them back to this place because it was so good for dragonflies. That's a male and female of one species. They breed in streams, but apparently when they're not breeding, they come back and just hang up in this oasis, and because it's cooler and shadier. And it's uh, chameleons everywhere, more of this Malagasy giant, a male in my hands, a female above, and a young one on the finger. And they bite fiercely. So if you catch them, you have to be very, very good at doing it. And then there are all kinds of different species. We saw quite a few. Here's another one. This is a young one of another species, about 3 inches long, maybe. And then one of the dominant, but we saw quite a few spiders too, actually all kinds of spiders. This is a really neat one called the lynx spider, which is all over Africa and Madagascar. It's in the same family as some of the web building spiders, but it doesn't build a web. It actually tracks down prey by moving around like any other predator might do. And we have quite a few butterflies that we put here. This is a very large swallowtail, which is very common in Africa. It breeds in citrus. Its larvae live in citrus trees like orange trees, lemon trees, and so forth. And it's on a flower there, which is native to Mexico. So again, we really saw again and again how these plants have crossed the ocean so much. And there's just spectacular rocks there. And we went twice on a trail through this Isalo National Park, the Namaza Trail. It goes along a stream for maybe a mile or more. We went. It was just wonderful. Just never knew what you're going to see when you went around another bend. Again, not a lot of birds. It's not a super birdie place. We just see all kinds of other stuff. But we did see birds. The gray chin. Most of the birds we could see were like when they were out in the open. If you're in the forest, if any of you have done a lot of rainforest birding, you know what that's like. And it's worse in Madagascar because the population densities are lower, not as many species. But there was an olive bee eater sunning itself right on the path. And more of these gaudy grasshoppers. And tiger beetles. Tiger beetles are common all over the world, including here in Washington, but this was a rather large, really fierce looking one. And many of you know African violets from horticulture. This is a member of that same group, the African primrose, closely related to the African violets, and found only in this part of Madagascar. This is the best place to see this species is on this trail. On the trail, we came to a fairly large clearing, which was populated by all kinds of neat things. These button quails. Button quails are actually in the shorebird order with sandpipers and gulls and puffins and things like that. And they're like phalaropes and having reverse sexual dimorphism. The female is the one on the right. The females court the males. They lay eggs for a male, and as soon as he's incubating those eggs, she's off looking for another guy, just like phalaropes do. But these are woodland and scrub country, very quail-like, but they're smaller than quail. They're quite small. And there's another lemur. This one we saw several of these on that trail. Again, look at those feet. That's so distinctive. They're all really just interesting mammals and not particularly afraid. I mean, they're used to people being there, so they weren't afraid of us at all. But then this was a special one. This is the lemur that people come to Madagascar to see, or you can see it in your local zoo sometimes. But the ringtails, this is a place we saw the most of them on this trail. And they're social. They go around in bands. If you're familiar with coatis from the New World tropics, these are somewhat reminiscent of them because they'll come down the trail and you'll see them, but their tails are always straight up as they're walking. And that beautiful ringtail is very special. The one on the upper right is a male. He is rubbing that tail with glands on his inside of his wrist and on his chest. He'll rub that tail with all those glands and get all the secretions from those glands onto the tail. And then two males near one another will have what they call stink fights. And they will actually sit there and wave their tails at each other like that. And that wafts that stuff against the other male's nose, and they can tell something about the other. Oh, this male is dominant. I better get out of here, or something like that, you know. And I read about that, and I thought it'd be interesting to pass on. The musky scent contains at least 233 chemical compounds. It's just an amazing thing that really tells an awful lot about that individual lemur. And there's one eating fruit. They eat fruit, a lot of fruit, and also insects that they catch, and probably small lizards and things like that. They're omnivores. But they're not, you notice this one doesn't have the big pads of the other one. It's not that much of a tree climbing lemur. It's mostly walks on the ground. So it isn't quite as modified. And it's got a more of a boxy looking face too. And just another snake. This is the other kind of boa. This is quite a bit bigger than the first one we found. And along this trail, there was a stream, which of course we were interested in because it had a fair number of dragonflies on it, including this beauty. It's a genus endemic to Madagascar. Nothing else like it in the world. And this one, this is a genus that's common in Africa and Asia, but this is a Madagascar species, the only one that has this silvery on the top of the wings. It's only an inch long. A very small dragonfly, but really spectacular. And it's a female in the upper left. There. And frogs, we didn't see very many frogs. This was wet here, so we found one. Most of the frogs we saw on the trip were on the west-east side. But we did see this lemur. It was one of these Barrows fox was on the trail. And somehow Netta and I got on either side of it. And so we were both photographing it with the other person. But I knew something about these that I really wanted to see. So we got in front of it and we hightailed it down the trail 50 yards or so and stopped and watched the trail with our cameras ready. And these have a very unusual mode of locomotion. They jump on their hind feet. They actually stay on their hind feet and jump along like that. And we got it. We got it. We were so pleased. And it saw us and then it stopped and went up a tree. But man, I just thought this made the trip right there. I mean, like every day made the trip. It was so amazing to see all that stuff. And then the next place we stayed was the Relais de la Reine. This is the stopping place of the Queen. It was a hotel right out in the middle of this sandstone country. And that's where we actually met the other tour people who had just flown in from Canada. And it was just a beautiful place. Couldn't recommend it more highly. Just surrounded, or on one side of it anyway, by these rocks. And a really nice hotel. This is one of our dinners we had with the whole group. And you can't beat having pineapple and mango and ice cream for dessert. And again, interesting reptiles, especially lizards everywhere we went. So just beautiful skink that I managed to catch. And butterflies, this blue pansy is a very common butterfly all over Africa, but it's on Madagascar too. And again, butterflies can fly, so African ones come over to Madagascar. And there doesn't seem to be as much exchange in the other way. There aren't a lot of Madagascar species that say have turned up on the coast of Tanzania or Kenya or something. I don't quite know why. But really, just if you like geology, this is just spectacular. And broadbill rollers were there. This is a species of the roller family, which again, are an old world family related to bee eaters and hoopoes and things. And they're aerial insect catchers, as you might guess from their wings, about the size of a jay or a little bit bigger. And the Madagascar kestrel, which we saw in several places all over the world, there's kestrels that look sort of something like ours. There was a lake nearby that we went to. And we saw some water birds there. These red-billed teals, again, an African bird all over Africa, but also in Madagascar. And some more frogs. Anytime you go near a wet place, you have a chance to see the frogs there. This genus, Heteroxylus, is one of the large genera of frogs in Madagascar. Quite a few species occur all over the country. Reed frogs. And I was tickled to see this particular dragonfly, which I'd seen elsewhere in Africa, but it was perched by an exuvia, which is a cast skin where another dragonfly has emerged, and it's the same species. So I thought, oh, we could title this "Revisiting His Childhood." And then we got on the road again in our bus and headed east for our next adventure, and that's it. Happy to take questions. I have one more thing. I remembered to say it. I told Toby I might remember. Toby Ross, a friend of ours, is a tour leader for Alight Tours, ALIGHT. You can look him up online. He is leading a tour to Madagascar this November, and there are spaces in it. 8 to 21. Thanks, Elaine. So if anybody thinks, oh my God, I got to go there, I would recommend that tour. And there's other tour companies that go there too, of course. Yeah. Question.
Thank you. Some island ecosystems are subject to invasion or introduced species. And is that the case in Madagascar? And is the wildlife managers or the government handling that?
Are we talking just about invasive species or
Well, I'm thinking like,
environmental
pigs or
problems?
rabbits or starlings.
Yeah. No, there's really, I'm trying to think if I could think of any species we saw there. The common miners were introduced, but they were very local. We only saw a few of them, just mostly in the towns. And yeah, no, there's really not. I'm trying to think about I'm sure there are other invasive plants in particular. I don't know of other animals. There's no non-native mammals there other than horses and cows and sheep and goats and pigs and that sort of thing. But they do have major environmental problems. A very large proportion of the beautiful forested part of the eastern part of the island is gone. It's been converted to fields and charcoal. They cut down a lot of trees and make charcoal into them for their fires that they use. So Madagascar is a major one of the highest level environmental disasters in the earth, really, because of all these wonderful endemic things there. And they're not, oops.
Sorry, someone's accidentally pushed a button.
Hey, hi there.
I have one from the away team.
Okay.
Is the desert rose poisonous to animals or birds or both?
Say that again?
Is the desert rose
Oh,
that you showed?
poisonous to animals. Yeah, you don't want to eat it. Oh, well, bird wouldn't eat those leaves. So it's really against mammals. Most of these plants that have toxic stuff in their tissues are against herbivorous mammals and herbivorous insects, of which there are a lot. So they fight again. They may be mostly actually against the insects rather than the mammals, but it affects mammals too. Yeah. I covered all the bases. Huh?
Sorry, ring-tailed lemurs, are they a common pet?
Oh, I don't know if they're a common pet, but I think some people have them. They're certainly in zoos all over the world.
Yeah.
Probably more of them have gone out of Madagascar than any other of the lemurs, as far as I know. Speaking of going out of, there's special chameleons, there's special frogs in Madagascar. They are the subject of the animal trade big time. There are poachers from Europeans, Asians, that go into Madagascar for no other reason than to find all those animals and sneak them out of the country and sell them $350 for one of those chameleons. I'm sorry, I shouldn't tell you that. No, they're really not.
Yeah. It just seemed to me in Paris that you'd wander into a cafe and there would be a herd of these lemurs.
Say that?
There'd be a group of ring-tailed lemurs being a popular pet in France.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
I didn't know that. Huh.
Okay.
Thank you.
Dennis, if you could only visit one area of Madagascar for wildlife, which one would you?
Oh, wow, that's a terrible question. Because the East and the West are so incredibly different. And I hope maybe sometime I can show WOS the east of Madagascar, the wet part. It's hard for me to answer that question because we didn't even go to the Northeast, which everybody says is fabulous. Or we didn't go to the Northwest, which everybody says, oh my God, you've got to go to the Northwest part of the Madagascar. So we missed major parts with major different animals and ecosystems. So, I mean, it's an amazing place. Yeah. So I can't even answer that. I think any one of those quadrants you went to, you would be very fulfilled. I can say that. Yeah.
So, how many million years ago did Madagascar be separate from?
I've forgotten, but it's
a long time.
Quite a long time ago. So you see, at 100 million years ago, Madagascar was separated from Africa.
There we go.
There's so many. Isn't technology grand? And then by 88 million years ago, it separated from India. And so that's a heck of a long time.
So all the species that are endemic there were there in some form or another from that time and then have evolved.
Yeah, there was something there that grew into all those lemurs. something that had grown to all those chameleons and so forth. But they've had obviously a very long time to evolve in situ on the island with mountain ranges and different climates and 1,000 miles long. Yeah.
It's like a laboratory.
Uh-huh. And that's the elephant bird, Apiornis, the largest bird that ever existed, was there. And if I get a chance to show the second set, I can show you I show you its egg, that big, bigger than an ostrich egg.
Was the kestrel the only raptor you saw?
No, the banded kestrel, Madagascar kestrel. What else did we see? Not a lot of raptors. Madagascar kestrel, the banded kestrel, just that one pair. There's a Madagascar buzzard, a buteo that we saw a couple of times. And I think that might have been all the raptors and two species of owls. So yeah, not rich in hawks at all. And it may be partly because there's so many of the creatures that are there are in these dense woodlands and fairly hard for there. Oh, we saw an accipiter. There was an accipiter we saw too, a sparrowhawk. Yeah, I think that was it. Yeah.
What did you think about the level of habitat destruction compared to other places that you have visited?
It's hard to say because, of course, I hadn't been to Madagascar 50 years ago. It is in the literature. It is said to be one of the worst in the world. Yeah. And partly, I guess, because you can destroy parts of South America and still keep most of the fauna. You destroy parts of Madagascar, you're killing off an awful lot of species that occur nowhere else. I mean, that's the reason for the major concern of that sort. And the people are very poor. The people have to cut down trees and make them into charcoal to stay alive. And so, you got to be sympathetic to the people as well as the wildlife. And it's a real dilemma. But there are lots of environmental organizations concerned with Madagascar, studying the fauna and flora, trying to save parks. They've got a pretty good system of parks, and hopefully they will stay relatively intact. But there are these poachers, these people that come in and steal chameleons and steal frogs to sell them for a giant profit. They don't seem to be doing that with lemurs much, fortunately, or birds.
Dennis, we'll give you another chance. Since you couldn't decide one place in Madagascar, how about which month would you go?
Well, we went in January, which was probably because it's the best month for dragonflies. It's the summer, and but for birds, I believe maybe October, November. I think that's the main breeding season, if I remember rightly. But I mean, I think you do fine for birds any time of year. Yeah.
Well, we go back to geology here.
Okay.
Does Madagascar share significant flora and fauna with India?
No, some things, but not much. Yeah.
The question had wondered about plate tectonic history, but we know that was way before.
Yeah, this happened a long time ago. And amazing. I mean, think of India drifting where it did. So it's got a lot of things that are somewhat different even from the rest of Asia, like cheetahs, for example, and some other African things. Yeah. You had a question?
What proportion of the snakes are venomous?
None. Zero. Yeah.
Great question.
So not a problem. Yeah. Yeah.
I have a question. Do lemurs have opposable thumbs?
Yes, they do. And they have opposable big toes. How about that? Just think so they can climb around. They use both, all their legs to climb around. But yeah, their big toe comes out like that too. Yeah. Pretty cool. Yeah, it's in a way too bad that they're not more often kept in zoos so people can see them and appreciate them. But anyway, you get to see the occasional slideshow. I don't know if there's been a David Attenborough program on Madagascar. Has there been? I wouldn't doubt it, that's for sure. Yeah.
I'm sorry, I'm fooling around here a little bit.
I don't know what we would do without Elaine.
You do a lot better.
No, we wouldn't. No, we wouldn't.
I can't seem to do what I want to do. Anyway, there was one more about safety. Did you feel personal safety was ever?
Never a question. Never a question.
But I think.
Good idea, Sammy. Yeah.
To Dennis,